I discovered the betrayal on a rainy April morning. The realtor's confused call woke me at 6 a.m. Mrs. Cooper? I'm at the Pinewood property with potential buyers who claim they already have a purchase agreement. There must be some mistake. My stomach dropped as I gripped the phone tighter. I owned 3 investment properties in Portland, my financial security, my future, and I had no plans to sell any of them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. There must be some mistake, I repeated to Mark, the realtor who had helped me purchase the Pinewood apartments 2 years ago. I never authorized any sale. My hands trembled as I pulled, on jeans and a sweater, still clutching my phone. Daniel, my husband of 8 years, rolled over in bed, mumbling something about it being too early for calls. The buyers have paperwork with signatures, Jessica, Mark continued, his voice tense. They're saying the sale was arranged through Eleanor Mason. Isn't that your mother-in-law? The world seemed to tilt sideways. Eleanor. Of course it was Eleanor. My mother-in-law had been increasingly desperate for funds to pay for my sister-in-law Vanessa's extravagant June wedding. A destination ceremony in Santorini, followed by a 300-person reception at Lakeside's most expensive venue, had pushed the budget well into 6 figures. But selling my property? That wasn't possible. She couldn't legally do that. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I told Mark, ending the call. I turned to Daniel, who was now sitting up, watching me with a puzzled expression. What's going on? Your mother, I said, my voice shaking with anger, is trying to sell Pinewood, my property, to fund Vanessa's ridiculous wedding. Daniel's face registered shock, then immediately shifted to defensive. That's not possible, Jess. Mom wouldn't do that. There must be some confusion. I'd heard that tone too many times in our marriage. Daniel instinctively defending his mother before even hearing me out. As I dressed quickly, I mentally cataloged the details of my property ownership. I'd purchased all 3 properties before. Our marriage, using the inheritance from my grandmother and my earnings from 5 years as a financial advisor. The properties were in my name only, though I'd added Daniel as a beneficiary should anything happen to me. More importantly, I'd arranged specific title restrictions on all 3 properties through my attorney, Michael Green. We'd created a trust structure that required multiple signatures and verifications for any sale to be valid. It was an unusual measure, but after witnessing Eleanor's manipulative behavior at close range for 8 years, I'd wanted the extra protection. Now, that precaution might save me. I drove to Pinewood in a daze, rain drumming on the roof of my car. When I arrived, Mark stood under the building's awning with an older couple who looked annoyed and a woman in a sleek pantsuit who I assumed was their agent. Mrs. Cooper, these are the Hendersons, Mark began, his professional manner barely concealing his discomfort. They have a signed purchase agreement for this property dated last week. Mrs. Henderson thrust a document toward me. We've already put down a substantial deposit with your mother-in-law. Our moving truck is scheduled for next week. I scanned the paperwork, my worst fears confirmed. There was indeed a signature that resembled mine at the bottom, clearly forged, along with Eleanor's signature as a family representative. The purchase price was nearly 30% below market value, a fire sale meant to generate quick cash. This signature isn't mine, I said firmly, and my mother-in-law has no legal authority to sell this property. I'm sorry you've been misled, but this sale is invalid. The Hendersons' agent stepped forward. We have a signed agreement, Mrs. Cooper. Backing out now could result in legal action. I felt a surge of clarity cut through my panic. Please, check the property records. This building is held in the Cooper Family Trust with specific title restrictions. Any valid sale requires signatures from both myself and my attorney, Michael Green, plus notarization and trust documentation. None of that is present here. The confidence in my voice must have registered because the agent's expression shifted. from aggressive to concerned. She pulled out her phone and began tapping furiously. "I suggest you speak with your title company," I continued. "They should have caught this immediately. And I strongly recommend you recover your deposit from Mrs. Mason before pursuing this further." As the agent confirmed my claims, the Hendersons' anger redirected from me to their own representation. I stepped away to make a call I should have made years ago. "Michael, it's Jessica Cooper. I need your help. The title restrictions we put in place? Eleanor tried to sell Pinewood." Michael's response was immediate. "I'll meet you at my office in an hour. Bring any documentation you have. And Jessica, don't confront Eleanor yet. We need to understand the full extent of what's happened first." By the time I arrived at Green & Associates, my shock had transformed into a cold, focused rage. Michael greeted me with a sympathetic expression. "I've already checked the property records," he said, guiding me to his office. "The title restrictions are firmly in place. Any sale without your authenticated signature and mine is completely invalid." I collapsed into the chair across from his desk. "She forged my signature, Michael. My mother-in-law actually forged my signature to sell my property." Michael's expression darkened. "That's a serious criminal offense. I need to know if she's tried this with my other properties." The thought sent a new wave of panic through me. A few keystrokes and phone calls later, we discovered attempts to list both of my other properties as well, the duplex on Maple Street and the small 4-unit building on Riverside. The title restrictions had prevented the sales from proceeding, but the attempts had been made. "What about my bank accounts?" I asked, suddenly realizing how vulnerable I might be. More calls, more verifications. Eleanor had attempted to access my investment account, but had been blocked by the 2-factor authentication. The enormity of her betrayal was still sinking in when my phone rang. "Daniel." "Jess, where are you? Mom's here and she says there's some misunderstanding about Pinewood." I put the phone on speaker so Michael could hear. "It's not a misunderstanding, Daniel. Your mother forged my signature to try to sell my property. She listed all 3 of my buildings, actually, to fund Vanessa's wedding." "That can't be right," Daniel insisted, his voice rising. "Mom says you discussed this weeks ago, that you agreed to help with the wedding costs by liquidating one property." My laugh was bitter. I specifically refused to sell any properties when she asked in February. I offered to contribute $5,000 from our joint savings, which was already generous considering how your family has treated me. "Jessica." Eleanor's voice suddenly came through the speaker. She must have taken Daniel's phone. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding. I was only trying to help facilitate what you'd already agreed to. By forging my signature? By listing properties you have no legal right to sell?" "I never forged anything," she replied smoothly. "Daniel gave me permission to sign on your behalf as you were so busy with work." I looked at Michael, who was taking notes, his expression grim. "Daniel doesn't have the legal authority to authorize that, Eleanor, and we both know I never agreed to any sale." "This family emergency requires sacrifice from everyone," Eleanor continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Vanessa's wedding is in 6 weeks. The vendors need payments now. You're being selfish, holding on to those properties when the family needs help." "Those properties are my financial security," I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. "They have nothing to do with your family." "But they could be family assets if you weren't so insistent on keeping everything in your name," Eleanor shot back. That's why Daniel agreed we should move forward with the sale. I looked at Michael, whose eyebrows had shot up at this admission. "Eleanor, I'm with my attorney right now. You've just admitted to attempting to sell property you don't own. That's fraud, and it's a criminal offense." A long silence followed. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice had lost its confident edge. "I'm sure we can work this out within the family, Jessica. There's no need for attorneys." "I think there's every need," I replied. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Don't contact me again except through Michael. And Daniel? I added, knowing he was listening. I'll be staying at Sophia's tonight. I need time to think. As I ended the call, Michael leaned forward. Jessica, this goes beyond a family disagreement. This is criminal fraud, identity theft, and attempted conversion of assets. You need to decide how you want to proceed. I stared out his office window at the rain, which had intensified into a downpour. 8 years of marriage, of trying to please the Mason family, of Daniel never quite taking my side when it mattered, and now, this ultimate betrayal. I need to know exactly what Daniel knew, I said finally. And I need to protect what's mine. Then let's start gathering evidence, Michael replied, opening a new file on his computer. Every email, every text, message, every conversation you can recall about these properties and about Vanessa's wedding. We need to establish a clear timeline. As I began recounting the details, a strange calm settled over me. The title restrictions I'd insisted on, the ones Eleanor and Daniel had mocked as paranoid, had just saved my financial future. Now I needed to figure out if my marriage was worth saving too. My phone pinged with a text from Sofia Rodriguez, my closest friend. Everything okay? Daniel just called looking for you, sounded weird. I quickly responded, No. Need a place to stay. We'll explain later. Her reply was immediate. Spare room ready. Wine uncorked. Come when you need to. Something about Sophia's simple offer of support broke through my shock. Tears filled my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't the time for breaking down. It was time for standing up. Michael, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I want to know exactly what legal options I have. Not just to stop the property sales, but to hold Eleanor accountable. And I need to understand what this means for my marriage. Michael nodded, his expression somber. We'll walk through everything step by step. But first, let's make sure your accounts and remaining properties are completely secure. By late afternoon, we had frozen any possible access to my financial accounts, verified the title restrictions were flagged prominently on all property records, and compiled initial evidence of Eleanor's fraud attempts. I felt drained but resolute when I finally left Michael's office. The drive to Sophia's house took me past the Riverside property, and I made an impulsive decision to stop. This small apartment building had been my first real estate investment, purchased when I was just 27 with every penny I had saved. I'd renovated it myself on weekends, getting to know the tenants, creating a community. Eleanor had always dismissed it as that shabby little building in the bad part of town. Now she had tried to sell it out from under me. I parked and just stared at the building in the fading light. The modest sign I had designed, the new roof I had saved for, the garden boxes the tenants had built together last spring. This place represented so much more than just financial investment. It was the physical embodiment of my independence, my capacity to build something on my own. My phone rang again. Daniel, for the 4th time. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I called the building manager, Carlos, who had been with me since the beginning. Jessica, good to hear from you, he answered cheerfully. Hi, Carlos. Has anyone been by the building recently? Someone claiming to be interested in buying or representing. Me? His pause told me everything I needed to know. Actually, yes. An older woman came by yesterday, said she was your mother-in-law, had some people with her who were taking measurements and asking about the tenants. I tried calling you but couldn't reach you. My heart sank. I'm sorry about that, Carlos. There's been a misunderstanding. That woman has no authority to sell this building. If she comes back, please don't let her in and call me immediately. Is everything okay, Jessica? His concern was genuine. It will be, I promised, hoping it was true. I just need to sort out a family situation, but please know this building. is not for sale, and anyone who says otherwise is not representing me. After hanging up, I sat in my car as darkness fell, rain still drumming on the roof. 8 years of marriage, dissolving in a single day because of garden parties in Santorini and Eleanor Mason's entitlement. I finally started the car and headed to Sophia's, my mind made up. Whatever happened next, I would never again let anyone make me doubt my own judgment or threaten what I had built. Sophia opened her door before I even knocked, enveloping me in a fierce hug. "Daniel called again," she said, leading me inside. "I didn't tell him you were coming here. Now sit down and tell me everything." So I did, the whole sordid story spilling out between sips of wine and occasional tears. Sophia listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly outraged. "That manipulative witch," she finally exploded when I finished. "And Daniel, he actually tried to defend her?" "He always does," I said quietly. "That's the problem. It's never really been me and Daniel as a unit. It's always been Daniel and his family, with me on the outside." "What are you going to do?" Sophia asked, refilling our glasses. I took a deep breath. "I'm going to fight. Not just to protect my properties, but to finally stand up for myself. Michael thinks we have enough for criminal charges against Eleanor." "Good," Sophia nodded firmly. "She deserves it." "But that's not enough," I continued. "I need to understand exactly what Daniel knew. If he authorized her to forge my signature." Sophia's expression softened. "That would be the end, wouldn't it?" "Yes," I whispered, finally admitting it to myself. "It would." My phone pinged with another text. Daniel again. "Please come home. We need to talk about this face to face." "Mom?" Is upset and confused. I showed the message to Sophia, who rolled her eyes. Still making it about her feelings. Typical. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I set my phone aside and really looked at Sophia's home for the first time since arriving. The colorful art on her walls, the books stacked everywhere, the overall sense of comfort and self-expression. Her house felt like her, authentic, warm, unapologetic. When had my own home started feeling like enemy territory? "I can stay up if you want to talk more," Sophia offered as I yawned despite myself. I shook my head. "I'm emotionally exhausted. But thank you. For everything." In the quiet of her guest room, I finally let the tears come. Not just for today's betrayal, but for years of small compromises, of swallowed objections, of trying to earn acceptance from a family that would always see me as an outsider. By the time sleep finally claimed me, I had cried out 8 years of accumulated grief. I was awakened at 3 a.m. by my phone buzzing persistently. Fumbling in the dark, I saw it was Daniel. "What?" I answered, my voice rough with sleep. "Where are you?" He sounded desperate, maybe even a little drunk. "I've been calling for hours." "I told you I'm staying with Sophia. I need space to think." "You need to come home," he insisted. "Mom explained everything. There's been a huge misunderstanding." I sat up, suddenly wide awake. "Did your mother forge my signature to sell my properties without my consent?" A pause. "She says you had discussed selling one property. She was just trying to help expedite things." "That's a yes, then," I replied coldly. "Did you tell her she could sign my name?" Another, longer pause. "I might have said you wouldn't mind if she moved things forward while you were busy with work." The last fragile thread of hope I'd been clinging to snapped. "Do you understand that's fraud, Daniel? That you just admitted to being complicit in a criminal act against me? Your wife?" "Don't be so dramatic," he scoffed. "This is family, not some legal battle. Vanessa needs this wedding to happen, and Mom is under tremendous pressure. And what about what I need? What about the fact that those properties represent years of my hard work? That they're my financial safety net?" "We're married, Jess. Daniel said, his tone shifting to the reasonable voice he used when trying to convince me to go along with his family's demands. What's yours is mine. We're supposed to help family in times of need. Something broke loose inside me, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. No, Daniel. What's mine is mine. Those properties are in my name alone. With legal restrictions, your mother tried to circumvent. And as for family? You chose your mother over me today. Maybe you always have. That's not fair. I'm going to hang up now, I interrupted. I have a meeting with Michael tomorrow to discuss pressing charges against your mother. Whether I include you in those charges depends on what else I discover about your involvement. Charges? Jessica, you can't be serious. This is my mother we're talking about. And I'm your wife, or I was. The words hung between us, their implication clear even through the phone. Don't do anything hasty, Daniel pleaded, his voice suddenly sober. Just come home. We'll talk this through. I'm not coming home tonight. Maybe not ever. Goodbye, Daniel. I ended the call and turned off my phone completely. In the darkness of Sophia's guest room, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations, legal complications, and life-altering decisions. But for the first time in years, I would be making those decisions for myself, not to accommodate the Mason family's demands. The title restrictions I had insisted on, the legal precautions Eleanor and Daniel had dismissed as unnecessary, had just saved everything I had worked for. Now it was time to save myself. The morning light filtering through Sophia's guest room curtains woke me just after 7. For a blissful moment, I forgot yesterday's revelations. Then reality crashed back, heavy and unmistakable. I checked my phone, which I'd turned back on sometime during the night. 17 missed calls from Daniel, 5 from Eleanor, 3 from Vanessa, 1 from an unknown number. I ignored them all and texted Michael. Still meeting at 9? His response was immediate. Yes. And Jessica, I did some digging last night. There's more you need to know. That didn't sound promising. I dragged myself to the shower, letting hot water wash over me as I tried to prepare for whatever new betrayals awaited. When I emerged, Sophia had coffee waiting, her expression concerned. You look like you barely slept, she said, pushing a mug toward me. That's because I barely did. I sank into a kitchen chair. Daniel called at 3 a.m. He admitted he told Eleanor she could sign my name on documents. Sophia's eyes widened. That's not just a betrayal. That's illegal. I know. I stared into my coffee. I'm meeting Michael at 9 to discuss pressing charges. Against your husband? Sophia asked softly. The question hung in the air between us. My wedding ring felt suddenly heavy on my finger. I don't know yet. It depends what else I learn today. After breakfast, I drove to Michael's office through morning traffic, my thoughts churning. 8 years of marriage potentially ending over garden parties in Santorini and Eleanor Mason's entitlement. But no, it wasn't really about the wedding. It was about trust, respect, and where Daniel's loyalties truly lay. Michael was waiting in the conference room, not his office. That was my first indication this meeting would be different. My second was the elderly man sitting beside him, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit despite the early hour. Jessica, this is Arthur Winters, Michael said as I entered. He was managing partner at the firm before his retirement. He's also Eleanor Mason's cousin. I froze halfway to my seat. Her cousin? Arthur Winters' expression remained neutral. Second cousin, to be precise. Our mothers were first cousins. I looked at Michael, feeling suddenly vulnerable. I don't understand. Please sit, Arthur said, his voice surprisingly gentle. I believe I have information that will help your situation. I sat cautiously, keeping my eyes on Michael, who nodded reassuringly. Arthur reached out to me last night after hearing about yesterday's events through family channels. Family? Channels, I repeated, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Arthur folded his hands on the table. Mrs. Cooper, I want to be clear that my presence here represents a breach of family loyalty. Eleanor would consider this a betrayal. But there are some behaviors I cannot condone, even from family. Something in his dignified manner reminded me of my own grandfather, principled, straightforward. I felt my defensiveness ease slightly. What behaviors specifically? Eleanor has a history of financial improvisation, Arthur said carefully. This isn't the first time she's attempted to appropriate assets that don't belong to her. Michael slid a folder toward me. Arthur has brought documentation of 3 previous incidents involving Eleanor manipulating family members' finances. I opened the folder to find neatly organized records, bank statements, legal correspondence, settlement agreements. The first set dated back 15 years and involved Eleanor borrowing $30,000 from her aunt's checking account without permission. She claimed Aunt Margaret had verbally agreed to lend her the money, Arthur explained. Margaret was beginning to show signs of dementia and couldn't clearly remember whether she'd agreed or not. The family pressured Margaret to let it go rather than involve authorities. The second incident involved Eleanor convincing her brother to add her to his investment account as a co-signer, then withdrawing substantial funds for what she called emergency family needs. The brother had eventually regained his money through legal threats, but had been ostracized by much of the family for taking action against Eleanor. The third and most recent case struck closest to home. 5 years ago, Eleanor had attempted to sell a vacation property co-owned by her husband Richard and his brother, forging Richard's signature on the paperwork. The sale had nearly gone through. Richard covered for her, Arthur said, watching my face as I absorbed this information. Claimed he had given verbal authorization for her to sign on his behalf. The brother was furious but eventually agreed not to press charges to preserve family harmony. 5 years ago, I said slowly. Daniel and I were already married. He never told me about this. I doubt he knows the full story, Arthur replied. Richard presented it to the children as a misunderstanding about paperwork, but I was the one Richard came to for legal advice before he decided to protect Eleanor. I closed the folder, my mind racing. Why are you showing me this? Arthur's expression was grave. Because I believe you're Eleanor's latest victim, and because I'm tired of watching her behavior go unchallenged due to family loyalty. What she's done to you is criminal fraud, and I want you to know you have support, even from within the Mason family, if you choose to pursue legal action. The unexpected alliance left me momentarily speechless. Michael filled the silence. Arthur has agreed to provide a formal statement about Eleanor's pattern of behavior if needed for either criminal charges or civil litigation. This could be extremely valuable evidence. I looked at Arthur, trying to understand his motivation. Won't this cause problems between you and the rest of the family? He smiled slightly. I'm 82 years old, Mrs. Cooper. I've reached an age where I care more about doing what's right than about family politics. Besides, I've always found Eleanor's behavior distasteful. Using her daughter's wedding as justification for theft is merely her latest manipulation. A thought struck me. Do you think Daniel knows about his mother's history? That this is a pattern? Arthur considered this. I suspect he knows pieces, but has been conditioned to minimize and excuse her behavior. The Mason family has a strong culture of closing ranks around their own, regardless of wrongdoing. The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. How many times had I watched Daniel defend his mother's increasingly outrageous demands and manipulations? How often had I compromised my own boundaries to keep peace? There's something else you should know, Michael said gently. We've been doing some financial investigation since yesterday. Eleanor has accumulated significant debt in recent months. Nearly $100,000 in new credit card charges and personal loans. My eyebrows shot up. For the wedding? Some of it, yes. But her spending patterns suggest other issues as well. Multiple Cash advances, charges at high-end retail stores, some significant payments to an entity called Lakeside Investments that we haven't been able to identify yet. She might have gambling problems, Arthur interjected quietly. There have been rumors in the family for years, though Richard always denied it. The pieces were starting to fit together. Eleanor's increasingly desperate attempts to secure funds for Vanessa's wedding weren't just about creating the perfect event. They were about covering mounting debts before Richard discovered the extent of her financial mismanagement. "What are my options?" I asked, looking between Michael and Arthur. Michael leaned forward. "From a legal standpoint, you have several. You can pursue criminal charges for the forgery and fraud. You can file a civil lawsuit for damages. You can seek restraining orders preventing Eleanor, and potentially Daniel, depending on his level of involvement, from accessing any of your properties or financial accounts." Arthur nodded solemnly. "All reasonable responses to what she's done." "And from a personal standpoint?" I pressed, needing guidance beyond the legal ramifications. Michael's expression softened. "That's entirely up to you, Jessica. But based on what we know about Daniel's awareness and participation in his mother's scheme, you have significant cause to reevaluate your marriage." The blunt assessment hurt, though it merely articulated what I'd been thinking since yesterday. I need to speak with Daniel face to face, to understand exactly what he knew and when. "That's reasonable," Michael agreed. "But I strongly advise having that conversation in a neutral location, not your home, and perhaps with a witness present." "I'll clear my schedule for the afternoon," Arthur offered unexpectedly. "If you'd like, I can be present for such a conversation. As Eleanor's relative, my presence might help prevent Daniel from dismissing your concerns as overreactions." The "we" offer touched me deeply. "Thank you, but I think this is a conversation Daniel and I need to have alone. I appreciate your support more than I can say, though." Arthur handed me his card with a personal number written on the back. "Call me anytime." "And Mrs. Cooper? I admire your composure in the face of this betrayal. That speaks to your character." After Arthur left, Michael and I spent another hour securing my financial accounts further and drafting formal notices to the title company and county records office documenting the fraudulent attempt to sell my properties. By the time I left his office, I felt better prepared but emotionally drained. I texted Daniel, "Meet me at Riverside Cafe at 1 p.m. Come alone." His response was immediate. "Thank God. We need to talk. Mom feels terrible about the misunderstanding." The persistent characterization of criminal fraud as a misunderstanding only strengthened my resolve. This wasn't a simple family disagreement. It was a deliberate attempt to steal from me, justified by family obligation. I arrived at the cafe early, choosing a table in the corner where we could speak privately but still be in a public place. When Daniel walked in, I was struck by how haggard he looked. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed. Some part of me still cared enough to feel a pang at his obvious distress. "Jess," he said, dropping into the seat across from me. "Thank you for meeting me. I've been so worried." I maintained my composure. "I have questions, and I need honest answers, Daniel. Complete honesty, for once." He flinched at the implication, but nodded. "Of course. Did you know your mother was planning to sell my properties?" "Not exactly," he hedged. "She mentioned helping with the wedding expenses by liquidating some assets, and I thought she meant talking to you about selling one property. Did you give her permission to sign my name?" He looked down, his fingers fidgeting with a sugar packet. I might have said something like, "If the paperwork needed to move forward and you were busy, she could help facilitate things." "That's a yes," I said flatly. "You authorized her to forge my signature." "I didn't think of it as forgery," he protested. "You're my wife. We share everything." "Except we don't. Those properties are in my name alone, and you know that. You've complained about it often enough." He had the grace to look ashamed. "It was just to help with Vanessa's wedding. You know how important this is to Mom. So important that she committed fraud? That you became complicit in it? I leaned forward. Daniel, do you even understand the seriousness of what happened? Your mother could go to prison for this. His head snapped up. Prison? Jessica, you can't be serious. This is family. Family doesn't steal from family, I countered. And yes, I am completely serious. I've been meeting with attorneys. I have documentation of the forgery and the fraudulent listing agreements. Daniel's expression shifted from defensive to pleading. Jess, please. Mom made a mistake. She got desperate because of the wedding costs. You know how she gets fixated on appearances. We can work this out within the family. Did you know about the incident 5 years ago? I asked, watching his face carefully. When your mother forged your father's signature to try to sell the lake house. His momentary confusion seemed genuine. What are you talking about? There was some paperwork issue with Uncle Jim's share of the property, but that was just a misunderstanding. No, Daniel. Your mother forged your father's signature, just like she forged mine. Your father covered for her. Arthur Winters told me everything. This morning. Arthur? What does my dad's cousin have to do with this? I explained my meeting with Arthur and Michael, watching Daniel's face as he absorbed the revelation that his mother had a pattern of financial misconduct stretching back years. His shock seemed authentic, which offered a small measure of relief. Perhaps he hadn't known the extent of Eleanor's behavior. I had no idea, he said finally, his voice hollow. Dad never explained it that way. There's more, I continued, deciding to lay all the cards on the table. Your mother has accumulated substantial debt recently, around $100,000. Some for the wedding, but a lot that can't be accounted for. Arthur thinks she might have gambling problems. Daniel shook his head vehemently. No, that's not possible. Mom is always so careful with money. She tracks every penny. Every penny of other people's money, perhaps. Michael has the financial records, Daniel. The debt is real. He sat back, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of distress I knew well. This can't be happening. It is happening, I said quietly. And now, I need to know where you stand, because the Daniel I married would never have helped anyone steal from me, not even his mother. His eyes met mine, tormented. I never thought of it as stealing. Mom said you'd discussed it, that you'd agreed in principle but were dragging your feet on the paperwork. She said sometimes you need a little push to follow through on commitments. The manipulation was so transparent it would have been laughable if it weren't so devastating. And you believed that? That I'd agree to sell properties I've worked years to acquire and maintain at a substantial loss for your sister's destination. Wedding? When you put it that way, he trailed off, then tried again. I just didn't think it through. Mom was so stressed about the wedding costs, and you've always been so independent about your finances. Sometimes it feels like you don't really see us as family. There it was, the fundamental disconnect that had always existed in our marriage. My independence interpreted as withholding, my boundaries seen as rejection. I've contributed to our household expenses equally since the day we married, I said carefully. I've attended every Mason family event, listened to your mother's criticism with a smile, even donated to family causes I didn't particularly support. But maintaining my financial independence doesn't mean I'm not committed to our family. It means I'm not willing to be financially vulnerable, and given what just happened, that was clearly the right decision. Daniel had no response to that, his gaze dropping back to the table. I need to know what you're going to do now, I pressed. Your mother committed fraud. I have the evidence. Will you stand with me if I pursue legal action? The question visibly tore at him, his loyalty to his mother warring with whatever feelings he still had for me. Can't we find another way? Maybe Mom could apologize, make some kind of restitution? This goes beyond an apology, Daniel. She tried to sell properties worth over $1 million combined without my consent. She forged my signature. She would have left me financially devastated if not for the title restrictions I put in place, restrictions you mocked me for creating. He winced at the reminder. When I'd first established the trust and title restrictions 3 years ago, he'd accused me of being paranoid, of not trusting the family. "What do you want me to do?" he asked finally. "I want you to recognize the severity of what happened. I want you to stop calling criminal fraud a misunderstanding, and I want you to decide whether your marriage vows mean more to you than protecting your mother from the consequences of her actions." Daniel looked genuinely torn, and despite everything, I felt a flicker of sympathy. He'd been raised in a family that prioritized loyalty above all else, that closed ranks around their own, regardless of wrongdoing, just as Arthur had described. Breaking free of that conditioning wouldn't be easy. "I need time to think," he said finally, "to process all this, to talk to Mom and get her side." I nodded, having expected nothing more. "I'll be staying with Sophia for now. I've already arranged to have some of my things picked up from the house." "You're moving out?" The reality seemed to hit him suddenly. "Jess, don't do this. We can work through this." "Maybe we can," I acknowledged. "But not while I'm living under the same roof as you. Not while you're still minimizing what happened. And certainly not while you're more concerned about your mother's feelings than about the fact that she tried to steal everything I've worked for." I stood to leave, then paused, one last question pressing on my mind. "Daniel, if the title restrictions hadn't stopped her, if your mother had succeeded in selling my properties, would you have told me before the sales went through? Or would I have discovered it only when strangers showed up to take possession?" His hesitation was answer enough. I would have made sure you were compensated fairly." The response broke something final inside me. "Goodbye, Daniel." I walked out of the cafe into bright spring sunshine that felt mockingly cheerful given my inner turmoil. I'd hoped the conversation would bring clarity, and in a way it had, just not the clarity I'd wanted. Daniel hadn't known the full extent of his mother's deception, but he'd been willing to participate in it. He'd chosen family loyalty over his commitment to me, and even now, he couldn't fully acknowledge the wrong that had been done. My phone rang as I reached my car. Sophia. "How did it go?" she asked without preamble. "About as expected," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He didn't know everything, but he knew enough. "He's still calling it a misunderstanding." Sophia's sigh was audible. "I'm sorry, Jess. What's your next move?" "I need to see the Riverside property," I said, the decision forming as I spoke. "I need to check on things there, make sure Eleanor hasn't caused problems with the tenants." "Want company?" I considered it briefly. "No, I think I need some time alone to think. But thank you." "My door's open whenever you need it," Sophia assured me before hanging up. 20 minutes later, I pulled up to the Riverside property. The small 4-unit building looked unchanged. The fresh paint I'd had applied last summer still bright. The modest landscaping well-maintained. Carlos's truck was parked outside. A welcome sight. He emerged from the building as I approached. Surprise. And then concern crossing his face. "Jessica, I was just about to call you. That woman, your mother-in-law, she's back. With some official-looking people. They're inspecting Unit 3 right now." My blood ran cold. "What? How did they get in?" Carlos looked uncomfortable. "She had keys. Said you'd authorized a pre-sale inspection. I tried calling you again, but—" "It's not your fault," I assured him quickly. "She doesn't have authorization for anything. Those keys must be copies of Daniel's set." I marched toward the building, righteous anger propelling me forward. The door to Unit 3 was open, voices drifting out into the hallway. I recognized Eleanor's immediately, crisp, authoritative, the voice that had intimidated me for years at family gatherings. No more. I stepped into the apartment to find Eleanor showing 2 men in business attire around the kitchen. Mrs. Chen, the elderly tenant who had lived there for years, sat on her sofa looking confused and distressed. The cabinets will obviously need updating, Eleanor was saying, but the space has potential for— Get out of this apartment, I interrupted, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. Now! Eleanor turned, momentarily startled before her expression settled into practiced disdain. Jessica, dear, I was just showing the property assessors around. Nothing to concern yourself with. These are not authorized inspections, I addressed the men directly. This woman has no legal right to show this property or discuss its sale. She has fraudulently presented herself as having authority she does not possess. The men exchanged uncomfortable glances. One stepped forward, extending a business card. James Wilson, Wilson Property Assessments. We were contracted by Mrs. Mason to evaluate 3 properties for potential sale. I took the card. Mr. Wilson, I am Jessica Cooper, the legal owner of this building. Any sales authorization Mrs. Mason claimed to have is fraudulent. My attorney has already documented the forgery and fraudulent listing attempts. Eleanor's composure slipped slightly. Don't be dramatic, Jessica. Daniel and I were simply moving things forward while you were busy. The family needs these funds for Vanessa's wedding. You've known that for months. I turned to Mrs. Chen, who was watching the confrontation with wide eyes. Mrs. Chen, I apologize for this intrusion. Your home is not for sale. You will not be displaced. I promise you that. Relief washed over the elderly woman's face. Thank you, Miss Jessica. I was worried when they started measuring everything. I faced Eleanor again, finding a strange calm in my fury. You need to leave this building immediately. If you return, or attempt to access any of my properties again, I will call the police and file additional charges beyond those my attorney is already preparing. Charges? Eleanor's voice rose an octave. Don't be absurd. This is a family matter. My forgery and fraud are criminal offenses, not family matters, I replied evenly. The fact that you're my mother-in-law doesn't give you the right to steal from me. The assessors were already backing toward the door, clearly wanting no part of this family drama. We'll, put our valuation on hold pending resolution of ownership questions, James Wilson mumbled. Once they were gone, Eleanor's polished veneer cracked completely. How dare you humiliate me like that, after everything our family has done for you? What exactly has your family done for me, Eleanor? I asked quietly. Besides criticize my career choices, question my commitment to Daniel, and now attempt to steal my financial security? We welcomed you, she snapped. We included you in a family far above your modest origins. And this is how you repay that generosity? By refusing to help when Vanessa needs you? The classism that had always simmered beneath the surface of her treatment of me was now fully exposed. In Eleanor's mind, my marriage to Daniel had been an elevation of my status, a favor granted that required perpetual gratitude and compliance. I offered to contribute $5,000 to Vanessa's wedding, I reminded her. You dismissed it as inadequate. Now I understand why. You needed much more to cover the debts you've been accumulating. Eleanor paled slightly. What are you talking about? The credit card debt, the personal loans, the payments to Lakeside Investments. Does Richard know about any of that, I wonder? For the first time since I'd known her, Eleanor Mason looked genuinely frightened. You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough, I replied. Enough to understand that this wasn't just about Vanessa's wedding. You're in financial trouble, and you saw my properties as the solution. She drew herself up, dignity reasserting itself. I've made some investments that temporarily strained our liquidity. The wedding expenses simply came at an inconvenient time. Once Richard's year-end bonus comes through, save the explanations for your husband, I cut her off. And for the authorities, if it comes to that. Now I want the keys you used to access this building. I don't have to— The keys, Eleanor. Now. I held out my hand, surprised by my own steadiness. After a moment of tension, She reached into her purse and extracted a keyring with several keys. "These are Daniel's copies," she said stiffly. "He'll need them back." "I'll make sure he gets new ones if necessary," I replied, pocketing the keys. "Now leave, and don't come back." Eleanor gathered her designer handbag and jacket, her movements precise despite her obvious anger. At the door, she paused. "Daniel will never choose you over family. You know that, don't you?" The comment was designed to wound, and it found its mark. But I refused to show it. That's for Daniel to decide. But regardless of his choice, I deserve better than what either of you have offered. After she left, I sank onto Mrs. Chen's sofa, suddenly exhausted. The elderly woman patted my hand sympathetically. "Family trouble's very hard," she said in her limited English. "You strong woman. You be okay." I smiled at her simple encouragement. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. And I'm so sorry about this intrusion." "No worry, I know you good landlord. Not sell my home." Her faith in me was touching. I spent the next hour checking on all the tenants, reassuring them their homes were secure, then reviewing the property with Carlos to make sure Eleanor hadn't caused any damage or problems beyond the unauthorized entry. As the afternoon waned, I found myself sitting on a bench in the small garden behind the building, watching the spring sun begin its descent. My phone vibrated with a text from Michael. "Arthur provided formal statement today. We're ready to proceed with legal action whenever you decide. No rush." The support bolstered me. I wasn't alone in this fight. I had Michael's legal expertise, Arthur's insider knowledge of the Mason family, Sophia's unwavering friendship, and my own resilience, forged through years of building my life and investments independently. Eleanor's parting shot echoed in my mind. "Daniel will never choose you over family." Perhaps she was right, but as I sat in the garden of the first property I'd ever purchased, watching tenants return home from work to apartments I had carefully maintained, I realized something important. Even if I lost my marriage, I would not lose myself or what I had built. The title restrictions I'd insisted on creating, the legal precautions Eleanor and Daniel had dismissed as unnecessary paranoia, had protected me when those closest to me had failed to do so. Now it was time to protect myself emotionally to establish boundaries as secure as those legal protections. I texted Daniel. "I've retrieved your keys from your mother, who was conducting unauthorized property inspections today. I've changed the locks. When you're ready to truly talk about everything, let me know." His response came quickly. "This has gone far enough, Jess. Come home so we can sort this out as a family." I stared at the message, noting the telling word choice. Not as a couple, but as a family. The Mason family, with its closing of ranks and excusing of wrongdoing. For 8 years, I'd tried to become part of that family, compromising my own values and boundaries in the process. No more. I typed simply, "I am home," and turned off my phone. The morning after my confrontation with Eleanor at the riverside property, I woke in Sophia's guest room with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. My phone, which I'd turned back on before falling asleep, showed 3 missed calls from Daniel and 1 from Michael. I responded to Michael first, arranging to meet him at his office at 11. Sophia was already in the kitchen when I emerged, coffee brewing and her laptop open as she worked on designs for her interior design business. "You look better," she observed, pushing a mug toward me. "More like yourself." I realized she was right. Despite the upheaval of the past 48 hours, I felt strangely liberated. I think I've been compromising myself for so long, I forgot what it felt like not to. Sophia nodded. The Jessica I knew in college wouldn't have tolerated half of what the Masons have put you through over the years. Her words stung with truth. The ambitious, independent woman who had methodically built her investment portfolio one property at a time had gradually been eroded by the constant pressure to conform to the Mason family's expectations. I'm meeting with Michael this morning, I said, changing the subject slightly. We need to decide how to proceed legally. Are you really considering pressing charges against Eleanor? Sophia asked, her tone neutral. I sipped my coffee, considering the question carefully. I think I have to. This isn't just about me anymore. Arthur revealed a pattern of financial misconduct stretching back years. If Eleanor faces no consequences this time, she'll just find another victim. What about Daniel? The question I'd been avoiding. I don't know yet. He was complicit, but I don't think he understood the full extent of what his mother was doing. Is that enough? Sophia pressed gently. Being too willfully blind to see his mother's crimes against his own wife? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Daniel again. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Jess, he sounded relieved. Finally, we need to talk. Mom explained everything. There's been a huge misunderstanding. I closed my eyes briefly, tamping down my frustration at the continued use of that word. What exactly did she explain, Daniel? She didn't know the properties were only in your name. She thought they were marital assets we jointly owned. That's why she didn't think she needed your specific permission. The lie was so transparent it was almost laughable. Daniel, your mother has been criticizing me for years for keeping my properties separate. She knows perfectly well they're in my name alone. Well, she thought you'd change things when we refinanced last year. We didn't refinance the properties last year. We refinanced our house. The properties were never part of that discussion. A pause. Maybe she confused. Stop, I interrupted. Just stop. Your mother knew exactly what she was doing. She forged my signature because she knew I wouldn't agree to sell. You know it too, which is why you gave her permission to sign for me instead of discussing it with me directly. Another pause. Longer this time. When Daniel spoke again, his voice had lost its reasonable tone. What do you want, Jessica? Money for your precious properties? Fine, I'll get it somehow. But this has to stop. You're tearing the family apart over what was honestly just an attempt to help Vanessa. This isn't about money, I said quietly. It's about trust. It's about respect. It's about the fact that your mother committed fraud and you helped her do it. So what now? You're going to press charges? Have my mother arrested? Destroy our family over some paperwork? The dismissal of criminal fraud as some paperwork told me everything I needed to know about where Daniel stood. I'm meeting with Michael today to discuss our options. I think you should do the same. Get a lawyer, Daniel. You're going to need one. I ended the call before he could respond, my hands shaking slightly. Well, Sophia said after a moment, I think that answers the question about where he stands. Yes, I agreed sadly. I think it does. 2 hours later, I sat across from Michael in his office, recounting my confrontation with Eleanor at the Riverside property and my conversation with Daniel that morning. So she's still actively trying to sell the properties, Michael said, making notes. Even after being caught in the forgery. That's bold. Eleanor has always been bold, I replied. She's used to getting what she wants. And she's desperate. For money right now. Michael nodded. The financial investigation has turned up more concerning information. Those payments to Lakeside Investments we noticed? It's a private gambling club. Eleanor has been making substantial payments there for over a year. The confirmation of Arthur's suspicion didn't surprise me. Does her husband know? Unlikely. The credit cards and personal loans are all in her name only. She's been careful to keep them separate from family finances. Until she ran out of options and turned to my properties, I concluded grimly. Exactly. Michael set down his pen. Jessica, it's time to make some decisions about how you want to proceed. We have several options. He laid them out methodically, his legal training evident in his clear explanation of the potential pathways forward. We could pursue criminal charges against Eleanor for forgery and fraud, which could potentially result in her arrest and prosecution. We could file civil litigation seeking damages for the attempted theft and the disruption to my business operations. We could pursue both simultaneously. And what about Daniel? I asked, the question heavy in my heart. Michael's expression softened slightly. Based on what you've told me, Daniel was complicit, but perhaps not fully aware of the extent of the fraud. He gave verbal permission for his mother to sign documents on your behalf, which is still legally problematic, but less clearly criminal than Eleanor's direct forgery. So I could pursue charges against Eleanor without necessarily including Daniel. You could, Michael confirmed, though his involvement would likely come to light during any investigation. At minimum, he would be called as a witness. I considered this, trying to separate my emotional response from the practical reality. What would you advise? From a purely legal standpoint, you have an extremely strong case against Eleanor. The forgery is documented, we have evidence of her attempting to access your accounts, and now witness testimony about her unauthorized property inspections. With Arthur's statement about her pattern of behavior, a prosecutor would likely be very interested. He paused, then continued. From a personal standpoint, this is obviously complicated by family relationships. Criminal charges would almost certainly end your marriage, as Daniel would be forced to choose sides in a very public and consequential way. The blunt assessment hurt, but I appreciated Michael's honesty. I think the marriage might be over. Already, I admitted quietly. Daniel is still framing this as a misunderstanding that I'm blowing out of proportion. He doesn't see the severity of what his mother did, or his own role in it. Michael nodded sympathetically. I'm sorry, Jessica. I know this isn't what you wanted. No, I agreed. But it's what I need to deal with now. I straightened in my chair, decision forming. I want to proceed with both criminal and civil action against Eleanor. I'll leave Daniel's involvement for the authorities to determine based on evidence. Are you certain? Once this process starts, it can't easily be stopped. I'm certain, I replied, surprised by my own steadiness. Eleanor has been doing this for years, according to Arthur. She's hurt other family members and faced no consequences because everyone closed ranks to protect her. That stops now. Michael made some notes, then looked up. There's one more thing we should discuss. In addition to legal action, we should take steps to formally secure your properties and document their current condition. If Eleanor is still actively trying to sell them, there's a risk she might take more desperate measures. What kind of measures? Property damage, tampering with tenant relationships, anything that might devalue the properties or create problems for you as the owner. I've seen vindictive family members do considerable damage when they feel cornered. The suggestion sent a chill through me. I hadn't considered that Eleanor might physically target the properties themselves. What do you suggest? A formal property assessment and documentation of current condition. Security cameras, if there aren't already some, installed. Written statements from tenants about any interactions with Eleanor or others claiming to represent you. And formal notification to all relevant parties, real estate agents, property management companies, title companies, about the fraudulent attempts so they're on alert. I nodded, making mental notes. I'll start on that today. One more thing, Michael added. You might want to consider restraining orders to legally prevent Eleanor, and possibly Daniel, from accessing the properties at all. The thought of taking out a restraining order against my own husband was jarring, but I forced myself to consider it objectively. If Daniel was still supporting his mother's actions, he might help her continue her attempts to undermine my ownership. Let's prepare the paperwork for restraining orders, I decided. I'll decide whether to file against Daniel after I've had a chance to speak with him again. Michael looked relieved. I think that's wise. We can have everything ready to file, if needed. By the time I left Michael's office, we had a comprehensive plan in place. He would begin preparing the criminal complaint against Eleanor while I secured the properties and gathered additional documentation. We scheduled a follow-up meeting for 2 days later to review everything before formal filing. As I walked to my car, I felt a strange mix of sadness and determination. This wasn't how I'd imagined my life unfolding, preparing legal action against my mother-in-law while my marriage crumbled. But I couldn't ignore the clarity that had come with Eleanor's betrayal. For years, I'd compromised to maintain peace, allowed boundaries to be pushed for the sake of family harmony. That time was over. My phone rang as I reached my car. An unfamiliar number. Jessica Cooper? A woman's voice I didn't recognize. Yes? This is Vanessa. We need to talk. My sister-in-law, Daniel's younger sister and the bride-to-be whose wedding had become the justification for Eleanor's theft. In 8 years of marriage, Vanessa and I had never been close. She'd always sided with her mother in any family dispute, viewing me as an outsider who had somehow entrapped her beloved brother. "I'm not sure we have anything to discuss, Vanessa." "Please," she said, her voice lacking its usual entitled edge. "Not over the phone. Can we meet somewhere?" Curiosity won out over caution. "Fine, Riverside Cafe in an hour." "Thank you," she said, sounding genuinely relieved before hanging up. I texted Sophia to let her know about the meeting, a precaution in case things went badly. Then I called Carlos at the Riverside property to check on the security measures I'd asked him to implement that morning. "All set, Jessica," he reported. "New locks installed on all entries, security cameras up at the front and back doors. I've spoken with all the tenants, and they know not to allow entry to anyone claiming to represent you unless they hear directly from you first." "Thank you, Carlos. You've been amazing through all this." "Hey, you gave me a chance when no one else would," he said simply. "I don't forget things like that." His loyalty touched me deeply. Carlos had been a handyman with a spotty employment record when I hired him 4 years ago. Other property owners had been put off by his tattoos and history of minor legal troubles, but I'd seen his mechanical aptitude and work ethic. He'd proven to be the most reliable employee I'd ever had. "I'm heading to the Maple Street property next," he continued. "Same security upgrades there. Should be done by evening." "Perfect. Let me know when it's complete." I arrived at the cafe early, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance. Vanessa arrived precisely on time, looking less polished than usual. Her normally perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans instead of her typical designer outfits. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I nodded but didn't reply, waiting to hear why she'd reached out. Vanessa fidgeted with her engagement ring, a massive diamond that must have cost her fiancé a small fortune. "I need to understand what's happening. Daniel says you're threatening to have Mom arrested for trying to help with my wedding." The framing was so slanted it almost made me laugh. "Is that how they're explaining it? That Eleanor was trying to help?" "She said there was a misunderstanding about selling one of your rental properties to help cover the wedding costs." "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Vanessa. Your mother forged my signature on sales documents for all 3 of my properties without my knowledge or consent. That's fraud. It's a felony." Vanessa's eyes widened slightly. "All 3 properties? But she told me you'd agreed to sell the small one to help with the wedding." "I never agreed to sell anything. When your mother asked in February, I offered $5,000 from our joint savings toward your wedding. She dismissed it as inadequate." $5,000. Vanessa trailed off, looking confused. "Mom told me you refused to contribute anything, that you said Santorini was an extravagant waste." I sighed, unsurprised by Eleanor's manipulation. "I did say the destination wedding seemed excessive given your father's recent retirement, but I never refused to contribute. Your mother wanted substantially more than I was comfortable giving. So she just decided to sell your properties?" Vanessa seemed to be genuinely trying to understand. "She tried to. She forged my signature on listing agreements for all 3 properties, at substantially below market value for quick sales. If the title restrictions I put in place hadn't flagged the suspicious transactions, I might not have discovered it until The properties were sold. Vanessa was silent for a long moment, absorbing this information. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. Why would she do that? It doesn't make sense. Dad has plenty of money for the wedding. He complained about the cost, but he approved the budget months ago. This was new information. Your father approved the full budget for Santorini? The venue, the flights for family members, everything? Yes, back in January. He said it was excessive, but that he'd cover it as his gift to us. Vanessa paused, her brow furrowing. Wait, if Dad already approved the funding, why would Mom need to sell your properties? The question hung between us, the obvious answer taking shape in Vanessa's expression, even as I voiced it. Because the wedding isn't what she needs the money for. It's an excuse. But what else would she... Vanessa trailed off, then her eyes widened. The gambling. Dad's always said those rumors about Mom were just malicious gossip from jealous relatives. I watched her connect the pieces, sympathy rising despite our historically strained relationship. Vanessa had always idolized her mother, adopting Eleanor's tastes, mannerisms, even her judgmental attitude toward me. This revelation would shake the foundation of that relationship. We've found evidence of substantial gambling debts, I confirmed gently. Credit cards, personal loans, regular payments to a private gambling club called Lakeside Investments. Vanessa's face paled. Lakeside. Mom goes there 3 or 4 times a week. She told me it was a women's social club. I'm sorry, Vanessa. I know this must be difficult to hear. She shook her head slightly, as if trying to clear it. No, I'm the one who should be sorry. I had no idea any of this was happening. I've been so wrapped up in wedding planning, I didn't see... She trailed off, then looked directly at me. Are you really going to press charges? The question was asked without her usual hostility, just genuine concern. I'm planning to, I admitted. This isn't an isolated incident. According to Arthur Winters, your mother has done similar things to other family members over the years. Uncle Arthur is involved? Vanessa seemed shocked. He came forward voluntarily with information about previous incidents. He feels it's time your mother faced consequences for her actions. Vanessa absorbed this, her expression troubled. What about Daniel? Is he in legal trouble too? That depends on what he knew and when, I replied carefully. He admits he gave your mother permission to sign documents on my behalf, which is legally problematic, but less clearly criminal than the direct forgery. And your marriage? Can you and Daniel work through this? The simple question carried complex emotions. I could see genuine concern in Vanessa's eyes, perhaps the first time she'd ever shown real interest in my feelings. I don't know, I answered. Honestly. Daniel is still minimizing what happened, still defending your mother's actions. He sees this as me overreacting to a family misunderstanding rather than responding appropriately to criminal fraud. Vanessa nodded slowly. That sounds like Daniel. He's always protected Mom, even when... She stopped abruptly. Even when what? She seemed to debate whether to continue, then made a decision. Even when he shouldn't. When we were growing up, Mom could be difficult, especially with money. If things went missing, Dad's wallet, my babysitting money, anything, it was always misplaced or borrowed in an emergency. Daniel would back up whatever story she gave, even when we both knew it wasn't true. The insight into the Mason family dynamics added another layer to my understanding of Daniel's behavior. He'd been conditioned from childhood to cover for his mother's financial misconduct. I'm sorry I've been awful to you, Vanessa said suddenly, catching me off guard. Mom always made it seem like you were trying to separate Daniel from the family, like you thought you were too good for us. I believed her because she's my mother. I never questioned her version of things. The unexpected apology touched me. Thank you for saying that. I never wanted to separate Daniel from his family. I just wanted healthy boundaries. Boundaries aren't really the Mason family specialty, Vanessa said with a sad smile. Something I'm starting to realize I need to work on myself. We sat in silence for a moment, the years of tension between us shifting into something more complex. What happens now? Vanessa finally asked. I move forward with legal action against your mother. I secure my properties against further attempts to sell them, and I try to figure out if my marriage can be saved. And my wedding? The question wasn't asked with her usual entitled tone, but with genuine uncertainty. That's between you and your fiancé, and your parents. My legal actions against your mother might become public, which could complicate things socially. But that's not my primary concern right now. Vanessa nodded, accepting this. I should talk to Dad. He needs to know about Mom's gambling, even if he doesn't want to hear it. That would be wise, I agreed. Arthur might be able to help with that conversation. He seems to have a clear perspective on the family dynamics. As we prepared to leave, Vanessa surprised me again. Whatever happens with you and Daniel, I want you to know I'm sorry for how I've treated you. You didn't deserve that. The simple acknowledgement meant more than I expected. Thank you. That means a lot. And Jessica? Be careful. Mom doesn't handle exposure well. When people confront her about things she's done, she can get vindictive. The warning echoed Michael's earlier concerns. I'll be careful. We parted with an awkward but genuine hug, another first in our 8-year relationship. As I watched Vanessa walk to her car, I felt a complex mix of emotions. The conversation had humanized her in a way our previous interactions never had. Behind the entitled bride-to-be was a woman beginning to recognize the dysfunction in her family and her own participation in it. My phone rang as I reached my car. Michael. Jessica, we may have a problem, he said without preamble. Eleanor just filed a countersuit against you, claiming you've been systematically excluding Daniel from marital assets and financially abusing him by keeping property in your name only. She's asking the court to freeze all your assets pending investigation. The calculated attack took my breath away. Can she do that? It's a desperate move with little legal merit, but it could potentially create delays and complications. I'm already preparing our response, but I wanted you to know immediately. Thank you. I leaned against my car, processing this new development. Is there anything I need to do right now? Come to my office when you can. We should accelerate our timeline for filing the criminal complaint and restraining orders. Eleanor is clearly escalating. Vanessa's warning rang in my ears. Mom doesn't handle exposure well. She can get vindictive. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I promised, ending the call. As I drove to Michael's office, my resolve strengthened. Eleanor's counterattack confirmed what I already knew. She would use any tactic, no matter how dishonest, to protect herself and maintain control. She'd done it for years within the family, and now she was attempting to use the legal system to continue her manipulation. But unlike her previous victims, I had prepared for this possibility. The title restrictions that had prevented her from selling my properties would now serve as evidence of my foresight, not paranoia. The careful documentation of my premarital assets would demonstrate that keeping the properties separate wasn't financial abuse, but prudent asset management. Eleanor had miscalculated in targeting me. For years, I'd worked in the financial sector before focusing on my real estate investments. I understood documentation, due diligence, and the importance of clear paper trails. More importantly, I'd finally reached my limit for accommodating the Mason family's dysfunction at my own expense. By the time I arrived at Michael's office, my focus had shifted from uncertainty about pressing charges to absolute determination to see this through. Eleanor Mason had made a critical error in judgment. She had assumed my desire to maintain family peace would outweigh my willingness to defend what was mine. She was about to discover just how wrong she had been. I spent the rest of the day with Michael, accelerating our legal strategy in response to Eleanor's countersuit. By evening, We had filed for emergency protective orders for all 3 properties, submitted the criminal complaint against Eleanor for forgery and fraud, and prepared a comprehensive response to her baseless claims of financial abuse. The judge will likely rule on the protective orders within 24 hours, Michael explained as I gathered my things to leave. Until then, I recommend staying away from your home and the properties except for essential business. I'm still at Sophia's, I reminded him, but I need to check on the Pinewood property tomorrow. Carlos finished the security upgrades at the other buildings, but Pinewood still needs attention. Michael frowned. I'd prefer you not go alone. Eleanor knows you're pursuing legal action now. The situation could become volatile. I'll ask Sophia to come with me, I promised, and I'll be careful. As I drove back to Sophia's house, exhaustion settled over me like a heavy blanket. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of betrayal, confrontation, and legal maneuvering. I'd barely had time to process the emotional impact of what was happening to my marriage and my relationship with the Mason family. Sophia was working late, so I had the house to myself. I poured a glass of wine and settled onto her back porch, watching the spring twilight deepen into darkness. My phone had been mercifully quiet since the meeting with Vanessa, but as if summoned by my thoughts, it rang. Daniel. I answered after brief hesitation. Hello? Mom's been served with legal papers. His voice was tight with anger. Criminal charges, Jessica? Really? She committed criminal fraud, Daniel. What did you expect? I expected my wife to handle family matters within the family, he snapped. Not go nuclear and involve the courts. Do you have any idea what this will do to my mother's reputation? To our family name? The selfishness of his concern struck me anew. Your mother forged my signature to steal properties worth over $1 million, and you're worried about her reputation? It wasn't stealing. It was liquidating assets for a family need. They weren't her assets to liquidate, I countered, my patience wearing thin. And according to Vanessa, your father had already approved the full wedding budget months ago. The wedding wasn't even the real reason your mother needed money. A pause. What are you talking about? I had coffee with Vanessa this afternoon. She told me your father approved the Santorini wedding budget in January, which means your mother's claim about needing funds for the wedding was a lie. That doesn't make sense, Daniel said, but I heard uncertainty creeping into his voice. It makes perfect sense when you factor in the evidence of your mother's gambling debts. The cash advances, the personal loans, the regular payments to Lakeside Investments. Lakeside is a women's social club, he protested automatically. It's a private gambling club, Daniel. Your mother has been going there 3 or 4 times a week, according to Vanessa. She's accumulated nearly $100,000 in debt over the past year? Silence stretched between us as Daniel absorbed this information. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost some of its defensive edge. That can't be right. Mom is always so careful with money. With your father's money, perhaps. But she's been hiding these debts in her name only. Michael has the financial records, Daniel. The evidence is clear. Another long pause. Even if that's true, pressing criminal charges is extreme. We can handle this as a family. Get Mom some help if she needs it. I sighed, saddened by his continued inability to see the severity of the situation. This isn't just about getting your mother help. She committed serious crimes that could have left me financially devastated. And it's not the first time she's done something like this. Arthur Winters provided documentation of 3 previous incidents where your mother appropriated family members' assets without permission. Arthur? Daniel sounded genuinely surprised. Mom's cousin Arthur is involved in this? He came forward, voluntarily. He's tired of watching the family protect Eleanor from the consequences of her actions. This is a lot to process, Daniel admitted, his anger seeming to deflate. But Jessica, criminal charges could mean jail time. I can't just stand by and let that happen to my mother. I understand that, I said quietly, and I'm genuinely sorry it's come to this. But I can't ignore what she did either. So where does that leave us? Our marriage? The question I'd been dreading. I don't know, Daniel. You've been complicit in your mother's attempt to steal from me. You gave her permission to sign my name on legal documents. You defended her actions even after learning she forged my signature. These aren't small issues we can just move past. I never meant to hurt you, he said, his voice suddenly tired. I was just trying to keep peace in the family. You know how Mom gets when she's fixated on something. I do know, I acknowledged. But your role as my husband should have been to protect me from that, not facilitate it. What can I do to fix this? The question seemed sincere, though I wasn't sure if he was asking how to fix our marriage or how to extract his mother from legal consequences. First, you need to stop minimizing what happened, I replied carefully. Your mother committed forgery and fraud. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a family matter. It was criminal behavior that would have had serious consequences for me. And then? Then you need to decide where your loyalties lie, Daniel. For 8 years, I've competed with your family for your attention and commitment. I've accepted coming second because I loved you. But I can't stay in a marriage where my husband helps his mother steal from me. The harsh truth hung between us. After a long moment, Daniel spoke again, his voice subdued. I need time to think. To talk to Dad and figure out what's really going on with Mom. I think that's wise, I said. In the meantime, I've filed for emergency protective orders for all 3 properties. Neither you nor your mother can legally access them until the court makes a ruling. You think we would damage your precious properties? Hurt and anger flashed back into his voice. After what's already happened, I'm not taking any chances, I replied evenly. Michael advised the protective orders as a standard precaution in these situations, and given your mother's countersuit claiming financial abuse, I agreed. Countersuit? What countersuit? So Eleanor hadn't told Daniel about her latest maneuver. Interesting. Your mother filed legal papers today claiming I've been financially abusing you by keeping property in my name alone. She's asking the court to freeze all my assets pending investigation. She did what? Daniel sounded genuinely shocked. I never agreed to that. You might want to have a conversation with your mother about what else she's done in your name without your knowledge, I suggested. It seems to be a pattern. After another long silence, Daniel sighed heavily. This is such a mess. I need to sort things out. Yes, I agreed simply. You do. After ending the call, I sat in the gathering darkness, turning the conversation over in my mind. Daniel seemed genuinely shocked by some of the revelations about his mother, particularly the countersuit and the gambling debts. Yet he'd still instinctively defended her, still framed her forgery as a misunderstanding rather than a crime. Could our marriage survive this? The question haunted me as I finally went inside to get ready for bed. 8 years together, building what I thought was a partnership. Now I wondered if it had ever been equal, if Daniel had ever truly put me first in any meaningful way. Morning came too quickly after another restless night. Sophia agreed to accompany me to the Pinewood property, where we met Carlos to complete the security upgrades. The locksmith is running late, Carlos informed us as we arrived. Should be here within the hour. In the meantime, I've started installing the security cameras at the main entrances. Thank you, Carlos, I said sincerely. I don't know what I'd do without you through all this. He shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. Just doing my job. Besides, you've always been fair to me. More than fair. As Carlos returned to his work, Sophia and I walked the property, checking each unit and common area to document current conditions. The Pinewood Apartments, a 12-unit building in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood, had been my largest investment to date. I'd purchased it 2 years ago when the area was still considered marginal, recognizing the potential before most other investors. You really have a good eye for property, Sophia observed as we inspected the recently renovated laundry room. This building must be worth at least 30% more than what you paid for it. Closer to 40, I admitted. The neighborhood has developed faster than I anticipated. No wonder Eleanor targeted it, Sophia said darkly. Quick cash. And lots of it. We were completing our inspection when my phone rang. Michael. Good news, he announced without preamble. The judge granted all 3 protective orders. Neither Eleanor nor Daniel can legally come within 500 feet of any of the properties until the hearing next week. I'm having the orders served this morning. Relief washed through me. That's excellent news. We're at Pinewood now, finishing the security upgrades. Perfect timing. The judge also denied Eleanor's request to freeze your assets, citing insufficient evidence for her claims of financial abuse. Her countersuit isn't dismissed yet, but this is a good indication the court isn't taking her allegations seriously. Thank you, Michael, for everything. One more thing, he added. Arthur called this morning. He's spoken with Richard, Eleanor's husband. Apparently, Richard had no idea about any of this, including the gambling debts. Arthur described him as devastated and furious. He's consulting with his own attorney today. The news sent a mixture of emotions through me. On one hand, I felt vindicated that Richard was taking the situation seriously. On the other, I couldn't help feeling sad for the Mason family, Daniel, Vanessa, and even Richard, whose lives were being upended by Eleanor's actions. Keep me posted if you hear anything else, I requested before ending the call. I shared the update with Sophia as we waited for the locksmith to arrive. She squeezed my arm sympathetically. This must be so hard, Jess. Despite everything, I know you care about Daniel and his family. I do, I admitted. That's what makes this so difficult. I never wanted to be the person who tore their family apart. You didn't, Sophia reminded me firmly. Eleanor did that all on her own. The locksmith finally arrived, and I left him with Carlos to complete the security upgrades. Sophia had a client meeting, so I dropped her off at her house before deciding to visit the Maple Street duplex. Though we'd already installed new locks and security cameras there, I wanted to check on the tenants personally. The Maple Street property held a special place in my heart. It had been my second real estate purchase, a rundown duplex in a quiet neighborhood that I'd renovated myself on weekends. The 2 units were currently rented to a young family and an elderly couple, all excellent tenants who took pride in maintaining their homes. Mrs. Abernathy, the 80-year-old tenant in the ground floor unit, was tending her front garden when I arrived. Her face lit up at the sight of me. Jessica, what a lovely surprise. I was just thinking about calling you. Is everything all right? I asked, immediately concerned. Oh, yes, dear. Just wanted to let you know that the new kitchen faucet is working beautifully, and to thank you for sending that nice young man to install the security cameras. Makes an old lady feel safer. I smiled, relieved that nothing was wrong. I'm glad to hear it, Mrs. Abernathy. Any other concerns? She straightened, brushing dirt from her gardening gloves. Well, there was one odd thing. Yesterday afternoon, a woman came by claiming to be from the city inspector's office, said she needed to check the property for code violations. My smile faded. Did you let her in? Goodness, no, Mrs. Abernathy replied indignantly. I've lived in this town for 50 years. I know all the inspectors, and she wasn't one of them. Besides, she didn't have any official identification. When I pointed that out, she got quite huffy and left. Relief mingled with concern. You did exactly the right thing, Mrs. Abernathy. If anyone else comes by claiming to represent me or any official agency, please call me immediately. Oh, I will, she assured me. Carlo already warned us about your mother-in-law potentially causing trouble. Such a shame, dear. Families should support each other, not cause problems. I smiled at the elderly woman's straightforward assessment. You're absolutely right. After chatting a bit longer with Mrs. Abernathy and checking in with the family in the upstairs unit, I headed back to my car, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. These properties represented years of careful planning and hard work. The people who lived in them trusted me to provide safe, well-maintained homes. I wouldn't let Eleanor's actions threaten that. My phone rang as I was about to drive away. An unfamiliar number. Jessica Cooper? A male voice I didn't recognize. Yes, who's calling? This is Richard Mason, Daniel's father. I tightened my grip on the phone, surprised. In 8 years of marriage to Daniel, I'd never received a direct call from Richard. Our interactions had always been at family gatherings, where he was typically quiet and deferential to Eleanor. Richard, hello, I managed, unsure what to expect. I'd like to meet with you, he said, his voice formal but not hostile. To discuss recent events? Would that be possible? I hesitated, uncertain if this was a good idea. I'm not sure that's wise right now, given the legal situation. I understand your caution, Richard replied, but I'm approaching this independently of Eleanor. Arthur suggested I speak with you directly, and I value his judgment. The mention of Arthur reassured me somewhat. What exactly did you want to discuss? Many things that would be better addressed in person, Richard said carefully. I've learned some disturbing information over the past 24 hours. Information that has changed my understanding of the situation considerably. My curiosity won out over caution. All right, when and where would you like to meet? Would 4 o'clock today work? There's a small coffee shop called Hartwell's on Main Street. It's quiet, discreet. I know it, I said. 4 o'clock is fine. Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate your willingness to meet. The call ended, leaving me with a mixture of apprehension and hope. Richard had always been something of an enigma to me, a successful financial advisor who seemed entirely dominated by his wife in personal matters. What disturbing information had changed his perspective, and what did he hope to accomplish by meeting with me? I texted Michael to inform him about the meeting, and then called Sophia to update her as well. Both expressed caution, but agreed the meeting could potentially be beneficial. Just meet in a public place and don't agree to anything without consulting. Me first, Michael advised. And let me know the instant it's over, Sophia added. I want all the details. The hours until 4 o'clock passed slowly. I used the time to review documents with Michael via phone, check in with Carlos about the completed security upgrades at Pinewood, and try to organize my thoughts for the upcoming meeting with Richard. Hartwell's coffee shop was indeed quiet and discreet, tucked away on a side street off Main. Richard was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. I took the liberty of ordering for you, he said as I approached. Daniel mentioned you prefer lattes with an extra shot. The small detail, that Richard remembered my coffee preference from conversations with Daniel, caught me off guard. Thank you, I said, taking the seat across from him. Up close, Richard looked older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Though always lean, he now appeared almost gaunt, with deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth. Thank you for agreeing to meet, he began formally. I know the circumstances are difficult. Yes, I agreed simply, waiting for him to continue. Richard took a deep breath. Arthur has shared with me the documentation regarding Eleanor's previous financial misconduct. I was aware of some incidents, but not the full extent or pattern he described. I've also reviewed the evidence regarding the attempted sale of your properties and the forged signatures. I nodded but remained silent. I want you to know that I had no knowledge of Eleanor's actions regarding your properties, Richard continued. Nor did I authorize or condone them in any way. I never thought you did, I assured him. He smiled sadly. No, I suppose you wouldn't. You've always been perceptive about family dynamics, even when you were too polite to mention your observations. The assessment surprised me. I'd always assumed Richard barely noticed me beyond my role as Daniel's wife. I've also discovered the extent of Eleanor's gambling problem, he continued, his voice tightening. Nearly $100,000 in concealed debt over the past year alone. Money that was supposed to be set aside for our retirement, for Vanessa's wedding, diverted to this addiction. Compassion rose within me at the visible pain in his expression. I'm truly sorry, Richard. That's a terrible betrayal to process. Yes, he agreed softly. But perhaps not an unexpected one, if I'm honest with myself. There have been signs for years that I chose to ignore. Missing funds explained away. Cash withdrawals that never made sense. I wanted to believe the excuses because the alternative was too painful to consider. His candor touched me deeply. That's understandable. We all want to trust the people we love. Richard looked at me directly, his gaze more penetrating than I'd ever seen it. Which brings me to the purpose of this meeting. I want to apologize to you, Jessica. To me? For what? For not intervening years ago when I saw how Eleanor treated you, for allowing her to create an environment where you were always the outsider, always slightly unwelcome despite being Daniel's wife. I knew it was happening, and I said nothing. The unexpected apology left me momentarily speechless. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, Richard continued. That it was better to keep the peace, but in doing so, I became complicit in Eleanor's behavior, just as I've been complicit in covering up her financial indiscretions over the years. I found my voice. You don't owe me an apology for Eleanor's behavior. Perhaps not, he acknowledged. But I owe you one for my silence, for not supporting you when I should have. The simple acknowledgement of what I'd experienced in the Mason family, the subtle exclusion, the constant criticism thinly veiled as concern, meant more than I could express. Thank you, I said quietly. That means a lot to me. Richard nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket and removed an envelope, which he placed on the table between us. There's something else I want to discuss. A proposal, of sorts. I eyed the envelope cautiously. What kind of proposal? I've been in contact with my own attorney since learning about Eleanor's actions, Richard explained. I'm filing for divorce. After 35 years of marriage, that's not a decision I make lightly. But I cannot continue with someone who would betray not only me but our children and extended family as Eleanor has done. The news stunned me. From everything I knew about the Mason family, divorce was virtually unheard of. Family image and reputation always came first. I'm initiating the process for my own protection, Richard continued, but also to send a clear message to Daniel and Vanessa. Eleanor's behavior has been enabled by all of us for too long, and it ends now. I'm sorry it's come to this, I said sincerely. But I understand your decision. Richard tapped the envelope. As part of this process, I've been reviewing our financial situation. Eleanor's gambling has created significant debt, but our overall assets remain substantial. I want to make things right regarding your properties. I shook my head. Richard, you don't owe me anything. The title restrictions prevented the sales from going through. No harm was done financially. But harm was done, he insisted. To your peace of mind, to your relationship with Daniel, to your standing in the family. And there were expenses involved in securing the properties, legal fees, lost time. He pushed the envelope toward me. This is a cashier's check for $50,000. It's meant to cover any expenses you've incurred and compensate somewhat for the distress caused. It comes from my personal accounts, not family funds, and accepting it would not impact any legal action you're taking against Eleanor. I stared at the envelope, unsure how to respond. That's very generous, but it's not generosity, Richard interrupted gently. It's restitution. There's a difference. His choice of words gave me pause. Restitution implied acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a desire to make amends, exactly what had been missing from the Mason family's response to Eleanor's behavior. There's one more thing, Richard added. I've spoken with Daniel this morning. Really spoken with him, perhaps for the first time in years. He's struggling, Jessica, torn between loyalty to his mother and his growing recognition of her manipulation. My heart squeezed painfully at the mention of Daniel. Despite everything, I still cared deeply about him. How is he? Confused, angry, ashamed. Richard sighed heavily. I raised him to believe that family loyalty was paramount, that we present a united front to the world regardless of private disagreements. Now he's realizing that philosophy enabled serious harm within the very family it was meant to protect. Has he decided what he's going to do about the legal situation? Richard's expression softened. He's agreed not to interfere with the criminal complaint against Eleanor. He won't be testifying on her behalf or supporting her defense. That was a difficult decision for him, given his lifelong pattern of protecting her. The news brought unexpected relief. I hadn't realized how much I'd been dreading the possibility of facing Daniel in court, on opposite sides of such a painful situation. As for your marriage, Richard continued, that's between you and Daniel. But for what it's worth, I think there might be hope there. If Daniel can break free from the patterns he's learned growing up, if he can establish proper boundaries with his mother, that's a big if, I said quietly. Yes, Richard agreed. It is. It will take time and probably therapy. Years of conditioning don't disappear overnight. But Daniel loves you, Jessica, more than I think you realize. Whether that's enough to rebuild trust after what's happened? Only you can decide that. I looked at Richard with new respect. The quiet, seemingly passive man I'd known for 8 years had revealed depths and principles I hadn't recognized before. Thank you for being so forthright. It means more than I can say. Richard smiled sadly. I've been silent for too long, watching Eleanor's behavior harm the people I care about, including you. Whatever happens next, I wanted you to know that at least one member of the Mason family sees you clearly and values what you've brought to our lives. As our meeting concluded, Richard stood to leave but paused. One last thing. Regardless of what happens with you and Daniel, I hope you'll allow me to maintain a relationship with you. I've always admired your intelligence and integrity, Jessica, even when I failed to show it properly. The simple acknowledgement of my worth from an unexpected source brought tears to my eyes. I'd like that, Richard. Thank you. After he left, I sat at the table for a long time, the envelope containing the cashier's check still unopened before me. The conversation had shifted something fundamental inside me, a wound beginning to heal that I hadn't fully acknowledged was there. For 8 years, I'd tried to earn acceptance from the Mason family, particularly from Eleanor. I'd compromised, accommodated, and swallowed criticism, all while maintaining careful boundaries around my financial independence. I'd thought those boundaries were about protecting my assets. Now I realized they had been about protecting something far more valuable, my sense of self-worth and autonomy. The title restrictions that had prevented Eleanor from selling my properties hadn't just saved my financial investments. They had preserved my ability to stand up for myself when the betrayal finally came to light. They had given me the strength to say enough after years of accommodation. As I finally opened the envelope and confirmed the amount of the check, I felt a strange sense of closure. Richard's acknowledgement of the harm done and his desire to make restitution represented something I'd never received from the Mason family before. Respect. Whether my marriage to Daniel could be saved remained an open question. But for the first time since discovering Eleanor's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope that something positive might emerge from this painful situation. Not just for me, but perhaps for Daniel and his family as well. I gathered my purse and the envelope, ready to leave the coffee shop with a lighter heart than I'd entered it. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same determination and foresight that had protected my properties when those closest to me had failed to do so. The hearing date for Eleanor's criminal charges arrived with surprising swiftness. In the 2 weeks since my meeting with Richard, much had changed. Eleanor had been formally charged with forgery, fraud, and attempted grand theft. The evidence was so overwhelming that her attorney had already approached the prosecutor about a potential plea deal. I sat in the courthouse hallway, dressed in a simple navy suit, waiting for the proceedings to begin. Michael sat beside me, reviewing documents one final time. We'd arrived early to avoid any uncomfortable encounters with the Mason family, but as the corridor began to fill with other cases waiting to be heard, familiar voices caught my attention. Vanessa and her fiancé entered first, followed by Richard and Arthur Winters. To my surprise, Daniel came in last, looking tired but resolute. Our eyes met across the hallway, and after a moment's hesitation, he walked over to where Michael and I were seated. "Could we speak privately for a moment?" he asked, his voice low. Michael gave me a questioning look, and I nodded. "It's okay. I'll stay in plain sight." We moved to a quiet corner of the hallway, still visible to Michael but out of earshot of the growing crowd. "You look well," Daniel said awkwardly. "Thank you." I waited, unsure of his purpose in approaching me. He cleared his throat. "I wanted you to know that I won't be supporting Mom in court today. Dad convinced me to see her financial records, the evidence of the gambling, everything. I had no idea how bad it was." "I'm glad you know the truth now," I said gently, recognizing how difficult this admission must be for him. "I'm sorry, Jessica," he continued, his voice cracking slightly, "for not believing you immediately, for giving Mom permission to sign your name, for years of not standing up when she treated you poorly. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past 2 weeks, and I'm ashamed of the husband I've been." The raw honesty in his words touched me, but I maintained my composure. "Thank you for saying that, Daniel. It means a lot." He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom's attorney says she'll likely get probation and mandatory counseling if she pleads guilty, and makes restitution. Dad's already arranged for her to enter a treatment program for gambling addiction starting next week." "That seems fair," I acknowledged. "I never wanted to see her go to prison. I just needed the behavior to stop and to be acknowledged for what it was." Daniel nodded. "Dad mentioned he gave you a check for expenses. Did that cover everything?" "More than adequately," I assured him. In truth, I hadn't yet decided whether to cash Richard's check. The gesture had meant more to me than the money itself. An awkward silence fell between us. So much remained unsaid, so many questions about our future unasked. "When are you coming home?" Daniel finally asked, vulnerability clear in his voice. The simple question carried immense weight. I'd been staying with Sophia for nearly 3 weeks now, using the time and space to think carefully about what I wanted. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "A lot has happened, Daniel. Trust has been broken in ways that can't be quickly repaired." Pain flickered across his face, but he nodded in acceptance. "I understand, but I want you to know I'm committed to rebuilding that trust, if you'll give me the chance. I've started seeing a therapist to work through my issues with family boundaries. Dad recommended her. He's been going too." The information surprised me. Richard had never struck me as someone who would seek therapy. "That's good to hear," I said sincerely. "I've also moved out of the house," Daniel continued. "I'm renting an apartment near downtown. I needed space from Mom's influence to think clearly about everything." This news caught me completely off guard. Daniel moving out of the family home was unprecedented. The Mason family had always lived in close proximity, with holiday gatherings, Sunday dinners, and constant involvement in each other's lives. His willingness to create physical distance represented a significant change. "That must have been a difficult decision," I said carefully. "It was necessary," he replied simply. "For me to figure out who I am apart from what my family expects me to be. To understand why I've always chosen Mom's version of events over everyone else's, even yours." Before I could respond, A court officer appeared at the end of the hallway, calling for all parties in the Mason case. Daniel looked toward his family, then back at me. "No matter what happens with us," he said quickly, "I want you to know I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. You were right to pursue this legally, and I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner." The acknowledgement meant more than I expected. "Thank you, Daniel." We walked back toward the courtroom together, separating as we reached our respective parties. Michael gave me a questioning look as I rejoined him. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I replied, surprised to realize I meant it. "Better than expected, actually." The hearing itself was brief and anticlimactic. Eleanor's attorney announced she would accept the plea deal offered by the prosecution, guilty pleas to forgery and attempted fraud in exchange for 3 years probation, mandatory gambling addiction treatment, and full restitution for any expenses incurred. The judge reviewed the agreement, confirmed Eleanor understood the terms, and scheduled a formal sentencing for the following month. Throughout the proceeding, Eleanor sat rigid and expressionless beside her attorney. Not once did she look in my direction or acknowledge my presence. When the hearing concluded, she was quickly escorted out a side door by her attorney, avoiding any potential confrontation in the main hallway. As we gathered our things to leave, Richard approached, Arthur at his side. "Thank you for seeing this through," Richard said quietly. "I know it wasn't easy, but it was necessary." "How is Eleanor taking it?" I asked, genuine concern in my voice despite everything. Richard sighed. "She's angry, humiliated, and still not fully accepting responsibility. But the treatment program is excellent, and with time, we'll see." "Are you still proceeding with the divorce?" The question was perhaps too personal, but I asked it anyway. "Yes," Richard confirmed. "That decision is final. Our finances are already being separated, and Eleanor will be moving to her sister's house in Portland after completing the initial treatment program." The news surprised me. I'd assumed Eleanor would continue living in the family home regardless of the divorce. "That's a significant change." "It's what's best for everyone," Richard said firmly. "Eleanor needs a fresh start away from familiar triggers, and I need to establish clearer boundaries, as do Daniel and Vanessa." Arthur Winters, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "The family has enabled Eleanor's behavior for too long. Sometimes true caring means allowing consequences, not preventing them." The wisdom in his words resonated deeply. In many ways, that had been my journey over these past weeks, recognizing that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships. "I should go," I said, noting that Michael was waiting patiently nearby. "Thank you both for your support through this difficult time." Richard surprised me with a brief, awkward hug. "Family is more than blood, Jessica. Remember that." As Michael and I walked out of the courthouse into the spring sunshine, I felt a strange mixture of closure and uncertainty. The legal matter was essentially resolved, but my personal life remained in flux. "What happens now?" Michael asked as we reached his car. "Honestly, I'm not sure," I admitted. "Daniel wants to reconcile, but I need time to decide if that's possible." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "For what it's worth, I've seen many couples recover from worse betrayals. Not all, but some. The key factors seem to be genuine accountability and changed behavior, not just remorse. Daniel says he's in therapy, working on boundaries with his family. He's even moved out of the family home. Those are significant steps," Michael acknowledged. "But ultimately, only you can decide if it's enough to rebuild trust." We parted with promises to stay in touch, Michael insisting I call him with any questions about finalizing the legal proceedings. As I drove back to Sophia's house, my thoughts circled around Daniel's request. "When are you coming home?" The question wasn't as simple as it seemed. The house we'd shared had never truly felt like my home. It had always been filled with Mason family expectations, Eleanor's influence evident in everything from the decor to the weekly schedule of family obligations. Could it ever become a true home for me, even with Daniel making efforts to change? Sophia was working from home when I arrived, eager to hear about the hearing. I gave her the highlights while making us both tea. "So Eleanor essentially got a slap on the wrist," she observed once I'd finished explaining the plea deal. "In terms of legal punishment, yes," I agreed. "But she's lost much more than that. Her marriage, her reputation in the community, her control over her children. For someone like Eleanor, those losses are significant." "And what about you and Daniel? Any decisions there?" I sighed, wrapping my hands around the warm teacup. "I'm torn, Sophia. Part of me wants to believe people can change, that Daniel can learn to establish proper boundaries with his family. He seems sincere in his efforts. But," she prompted, "but 8 years of patterns don't vanish overnight. What happens the next time Eleanor needs something and plays on his guilt? What happens when the family pressures him to get over it and return to the old dynamics?" Sophia nodded, understanding. No easy answers there. "I think I need to see sustained change before making any decisions," I said slowly, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. Words and short-term actions aren't enough. I need to know that Daniel's commitment to boundaries will hold even when tested. "That sounds wise," Sophia agreed. "And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, I think I need my own space, not Daniel's. House, not your guest room, but somewhere that's just mine." The decision felt right as soon as I voiced it. "Maybe one of the units at Riverside is coming available soon." "You'd live in one of your own buildings?" Sophia looked surprised. I smiled. "Why not? They're well maintained, in a neighborhood I like, and it would give me independence while I figure out next steps. Besides, it would be temporary, either until Daniel and I reconcile or until I'm ready for a more permanent arrangement." The plan took shape quickly over the next few days. One of the tenants at the Riverside property was coincidentally moving out at the end of the month, and Carlos assured me he could have the unit freshly painted and ready within 2 weeks. I arranged to move my essential belongings from Daniel's house while he was at work, leaving a note explaining my decision. The evening after my move, Daniel called. "I got your note," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "You're living at Riverside?" "For now," I confirmed. "I need some space that's truly mine while I think about everything." A pause. Are you moving toward divorce?" "No," I said honestly. "It's me giving us both the space to determine what a healthier relationship might look like, if that's possible." His relief was audible. "I'd like that chance, Jessica. I know I've hurt you badly, and I know trust won't come back quickly. But I want to try." "So do I admitted. But slowly, and with clear expectations. We'd need counseling, Daniel, both individually and as a couple." "I'm already seeing someone individually," he reminded me. "And I'm open to couples counseling whenever you're ready." We talked for nearly an hour, outlining preliminary boundaries and expectations. No Mason family Sunday dinners unless mutually agreed upon. No discussions of our marriage with his parents. No financial decisions without full transparency and agreement. The conversation was tentative but hopeful, both of us recognizing the work ahead while acknowledging the foundation that remained. 3 days later, Daniel asked if he could see my new place. I agreed with some trepidation, unsure how he would react to my choice to live in one of my investment properties rather than returning to our home. "It's nice," he said sincerely as I showed him around the modest one-bedroom apartment. "Feels like you." The observation caught me by surprise. "What do you mean?" "Practical but comfortable. Thoughtful touches without being showy." He gestured to the simple but elegant furnishings I'd selected. "Our house never felt like this. It was always decorated according to Mom's taste, wasn't it?" The insight, that he recognized how his mother's influence had shaped our living space, gave me a flutter of hope. Yes, it was. When you decide to come back, Daniel said carefully, I want us to redecorate. Make it truly our home, not an extension of the Mason family house. The offer meant more than he could know. I'd like that. Over the following weeks, Daniel and I began the slow process of rebuilding. We started couples counseling with a therapist specializing in family of origin issues. We had dinner together twice a week, sometimes at restaurants, sometimes at my apartment. Slowly, cautiously, we began to rediscover why we'd fallen in love in the first place, free from the constant presence of the Mason family dynamics. Eleanor completed her initial treatment program and moved to Portland as planned. The distance helped Daniel maintain his boundaries, though her occasional phone calls still triggered old patterns he had to consciously resist. Richard filed the final divorce papers and began building a new life of his own, finding unexpected friendship and support in Arthur Winters. 3 months after moving into the Riverside apartment, I found myself sitting on my small balcony one evening, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The title restrictions I'd added to my properties, the legal precautions that Eleanor and Daniel had once dismissed as unnecessary paranoia, had saved more than just my financial investments. They had catalyzed a complete transformation in my life and relationships. By protecting what was mine, I'd learned to value myself in ways I hadn't before. I'd discovered strength I didn't know I possessed and allies I hadn't recognized. Most importantly, I'd established boundaries that allowed for genuine connection rather than compliance. My phone rang with a text from Daniel. Still on for dinner? Tomorrow? I have something important to ask you. I smiled, suspecting what the question might be. After months of careful rebuilding, we'd reached a new level of trust. Not the blind trust of our early marriage, but something more grounded in reality and mutual respect. Whether I said yes to returning home, to the house we were slowly remaking into our own space, remained to be decided. But whatever choice I made would be from a position of strength and self-knowledge, not compromise or accommodation. The title restrictions that had once seemed like excessive caution had given me the most precious restriction of all, the ability to say enough when boundaries were crossed. That gift would shape every relationship in my life going forward, most especially my marriage. As the sun set over the Riverside property, I texted back, looking forward to it. And yes, I'm ready for that conversation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.